Breaking news, Ukrainian forces have begun, quote, shaping operations in the much anticipated counteroffensive. Sources are telling CNN's Jim Sciutto tonight. Senior U.S. officials saying the operations could continue for days before Ukraine launches the bulk of the counteroffensive, and it could also be designed to confuse Russia's military. The significant development coming as Vladimir Putin's spokesperson made a jaw-dropping claim that Russia's setbacks in Ukraine are happening because, quote, Russia is, quote, not waging war. And then Dmitry Peskov went on to say this, quote, waging war is a completely different thing. It's total destruction of infrastructure, total destruction of cities, and so on. We don't do that. I mean, this is a whole new level of spin, gaslighting, propaganda. I mean, it really is stunning. They don't destroy cities. Look at this before and after image. Mariupol, that once thriving city in southern Ukraine where Russia razed to the ground and now occupies. Or look at the charred, utterly destroyed, hollowed-out town of Bakhmut as it stands today. And then look at it before Russia's invasion, before and after satellite images. I mean, to borrow a phrase from Peskov, total destruction. And as for infrastructure, targeting Ukrainian power, rail, and roads has been a constant in Putin's war. Cities in the dark, people in the cold. Targeting infrastructure has been a core of this whole thing to break Ukraine's will. Yes, they do that. And Peskov's completely false claims are coming as the head of the brutal private army. The Wagner Group is publicly going after Putin's generals. Fred Pleitgen is out front.
After months of brutal fighting, the battle for Bakhmut may be pushing Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin closer to the edge. Standing in front of the bodies of his dead fighters, he launched into a rant against Russia's military leadership, blaming them for the deaths.
You think you are the masters of this life? You think you can dispose of other lives? You think because you have warehouses full of ammunition that you have that right?
For months, Prigozhin and Vladimir Putin's top generals Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov have been mired in severe infighting. But now, the Wagner boss's tirades are becoming more vicious and more frequent, accusing Russia's defense minister of withholding much-needed ammo.
Instead of using a shell to kill an enemy and saving one of our soldiers' lives, they are killing our soldiers.
In a country where thousands have been jailed for criticizing Vladimir Putin's war, Prigozhin is getting away with his tantrums. That's because Putin doesn't fully trust his own military and needs Prigozhin, Russian investigative journalist Andrei Soldatov believes.
He's extremely paranoid about control and political stability. Prigozhin is a tool to, if not to keep the military in check, at least to keep them off balance.
The infighting seems to be costing Russia both lives and momentum. Ukraine's army now says it is making gains in Bakhmut. And while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his forces' long-anticipated counter-offensive has not yet started, Prigozhin today once again accusing the Russian army of cutting and running.
Those territories that were liberated with the blood and lives of our comrades, every day progressed by dozens or hundreds of meters during many months, today are abandoned almost without any fight by those who are supposed to hold our flanks.
Bakhmut was supposed to be a much-needed win for Vladimir Putin, but now it could ring in major problems to come, Andrei Soldatov says.
I think he is nervous. Putin learned that he cannot trust completely what his people are telling him.
And you know, Aaron, we're keeping a close eye on pretty much everything that Yevgeny Prigozhin has been saying over the past couple of days and is saying tonight. And he did tonight come out with another audio message where he claimed that his mercenaries are continuing to move forward in Bakhmut. However, all this comes as a commander on the ground tells CNN that they've killed hundreds of Russians over the past couple of days and are advancing in the southwest and the northwest of Bakhmut. So clearly that infighting already costing the Russians dearly, Aaron.
All right, Fred, thank you very much. And out front now, retired Army General and former CIA Director David Petraeus. And General Petraeus, I really appreciate your time. So you've got Yevgeny Prigozhin. He is very publicly continuing to slam Putin's top generals who are running the war. Putin publicly, Prigozhin's getting away with it. What do you think is going on here?
Well, Putin has tolerated dissent to his right wing, that which is critical of the war not being prosecuted sufficiently aggressively, because it plays into what he's trying to achieve. And he's willing to allow them to attack his generals, his minister of defense to a degree, as long as it doesn't touch him. But the fact that he does tolerate this is just reflective of the undercurrents of dissent and dispute and the drama and all of this, which is not good for the Russian forces. It also reminds us that the Russian force that's on the battlefield now is relatively incoherent. You have the Wagner Group, the paramilitary, taking orders from Prigozhin, not always listening to the Ministry of Defense. You have the Chechens and their own chain of command. Now, and then beyond that, I think, Aaron, you have to look at the Russian forces themselves, and you conclude they're not well trained anymore, if they ever were. They're not well equipped anymore. They've taken enormous casualties and enormous losses of armored systems and other materiel. They're not well led. Again, it's not a coherent structure, and they're not well disciplined. And by contrast, you see the Ukrainians, who are going to field now as many as 10 new brigades of 3,000 to 3,500 troops each, depending on the type of brigade, quite well equipped, especially the 6 or more that are the armor brigades that will have the Western tanks now for the first time, infantry fighting vehicles and other systems. They've been training hard. They're well led. They're well disciplined. They're cohesive units as opposed to just battered units filled up with individual replacements. So you contrast again the Ukrainians with this Russian force, and I think we're going to see the Ukrainians do better than many are assessing, and the Russians do worse. They're going to crumble, and the question is, how broad is that crumbling or the collapse, if you will?
And how significant, Zelensky today said Ukraine needs a bit more time to prepare to launch the counteroffensive. But, the UK now says they're providing those longer range cruise missiles to Ukraine, which obviously could be significant. And I should notice comes in contrast to the US, right, which has declined to provide those ATACMS and has refused to do that. How significant is that? And I guess, General, I'll ask you, are you disappointed that it's not the US doing it, or that the US is not also doing it?
Well, the UK actually has led in a number of cases, really since the very beginning. In fact, before the beginning of the war, remember, they were the first with the man-portable anti-tank systems. We watched to see what the Russians would do, and they sent in maybe hundreds. 48, 72 hours later, we start plowing in thousands. And the same with the anti-ship missiles, as you may recall. They were the first, actually, even I think the first major prime minister to visit. So I don't think it's completely uncharacteristic of what has happened. And let's see now if there is a response. And then hopefully, I'd like to see us commit to provide the Army Tactical Missile System, which would take it from 150 kilometers to 300 kilometers range. And it would put many more of the logistical bases, headquarters, depots, and so forth in Crimea within range, especially if they achieve the kind of success that I think they will. And then in terms of timing, I think you have to keep in mind that they can't really start this offensive until the ground is sufficiently dry and solid so that you can run tracked vehicles, tanks and infantry fighting vehicles across the countryside and get off the roads. You don't want to be roadbound, as you'll recall the Russians were during the attack on Kyiv, which means you end up with a 40-mile traffic jam, because the obstacles, the defensive positions naturally do focus quite a bit on the major roads.
During a CNN town hall, the former President Trump claimed that he could end the war in 24 hours if he was president. Of course, he didn't say whether he wanted Ukraine or Russia to win, and then said this when he was asked if he thought Vladimir Putin was a war criminal. Let me play it for you.
I think it's something that should not be discussed now. It should be discussed later, because right now we have to get a war. If you say he's a war criminal, it's going to be a lot tougher to make a deal to get this thing stopped.
Now, General, I picked this portion because I know that you have labeled Putin a war criminal. President Biden has labeled Putin a war criminal. What do you make of Trump's refusing to do so, his reasons for not doing so?
Well, again, it's sort of immaterial. The president of the United States and all other major leaders of the Western world have labeled Putin a war criminal. You can't put that back. You can't take those words back. And beyond that, not only is he individually overseeing operations that are terrible in what it is that they're doing to innocent civilians and violations of the law of land warfare, Geneva Convention, and so forth, it's almost as if they propagate a culture of committing war crimes.
General Petraeus, thank you so much. I appreciate your time tonight.
Good to be with you, Aaron. Thank you.